In 1274, Kublai Khan, the grandson of the legendary Genghis Khan, launched an invasion of Japan with a fleet of 30,000 men. Starting from South Korea, the Mongols quickly conquered the Japanese islands of Tsushima and Iki. However, upon reaching Hakata Bay on Kyushu, they faced fierce resistance from the samurai. Kublai Khan was forced to retreat, but as his fleet regrouped, a massive typhoon struck, sinking 200 ships and ending the invasion. Undeterred, Khan spent the next 7 years rebuilding his forces for a second attempt. In 1281, the Mongols returned with an even larger fleet of 4,500 ships and 140,000 men, the largest invasion force ever assembled until D-Day in 1944. Estimates suggest the Japanese defenders were outnumbered more than 3-1. But just as victory seemed certain for the Mongols, another massive typhoon devastated their fleet. This time, only a few hundred ships survived, and tens of thousands of Mongol soldiers drowned, while survivors were executed by the Japanese. These twin defeats led the Mongols to abandon their conquest of Japan, with many Japanese believing that divine intervention in the form of the typhoons had saved them. The storms became known as Kamikaze, meaning divine wind. Centuries later, during World War II, the Japanese would again face overwhelming odds, this time against the United States. In a desperate attempt to turn the tide, Emperor Hirohito authorized the use of kamikaze tactics, naming them after the divine winds that once protected Japan. On October 25, 1944, Japanese pilots carried out the first suicide missions against a U.S. Navy fleet. The term kamikaze, meaning reckless or self-destructive, became infamous. But the tactics went beyond just aircraft. They included suicide torpedoes, divers, and even human landmines. By the time of the war's Pacific Theater, Japan's Air Force, once a dominant force, had been severely weakened, especially after the Battle of Midway in June 1942. The U.S. Navy's decisive victory crippled the Japanese fleet, sinking all 4 of their aircraft carriers and killing more than 3,000 personnel. As Japan's resources dwindled, they turned to suicide missions as a last-ditch effort to strike back. Many kamikaze pilots were young and inexperienced, often flying outdated aircraft. Some planes, like the Yokosuka MXY-7 Oka, were even designed as flying bombs, launched from larger bombers to dive directly into Allied ships. During the war, nearly 4,000 kamikaze pilots were deployed, and while only about 1 in 5 succeeded in hitting their targets, they managed to sink at least 34 ships and severely damage hundreds more. The Japanese also developed Kaiten, manned torpedoes with a pilot inside. However, these weapons had significant flaws, such as the need for the submarine carrying them to remain near the surface, making them vulnerable to enemy attack. Despite this, Japanese engineers later developed the Kairyu, a more advanced version, but it was never used in combat due to Japan's surrender. Other kamikaze tactics included scuba divers carrying mines, called fukuryu, or crouching dragons. These divers were tasked with attaching mines to enemy landing craft. But despite plans to deploy 6,000, only about 1,200 were ready by the time Japan surrendered. Similarly, Japanese soldiers carried lunge mines, armor-piercing explosives on long poles, to attack American tanks, but there are no records of these weapons being effective. While the physical damage caused by these weapons was often minimal, the psychological impact on Allied forces was immense. Many soldiers were terrified of the relentless kamikaze attacks, and some even panicked, firing on their own planes. The idea of an enemy willing to sacrifice their life for a single attack was profoundly unsettling. However, not all Japanese soldiers volunteered for kamikaze missions willingly. Many were pressured or coerced into service. Admiral Takejiro Onishi, known as the father of kamikaze, oversaw the development and deployment of these units. After Japan's surrender, Onishi committed seppuku, a ritual suicide, as penance for the loss of the 4,000 pilots he had sent to their deaths. His death marked the tragic end of Japan's kamikaze strategy. This harrowing chapter in history reflects not only the desperation of wartime Japan, but also the extreme lengths to which they were willing to go to try to save their nation. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more, and comment your thoughts down below.